Got another call we want to get to real quick. Is it Vo or Voe?
Yeah.
Vo?
Hey, guys. I've been watching your show for a while off and on, and it just sort of occurred to me that, people who say they believe in God, they're talking about belief. It seems really difficult to prove it, in a conventional sense, one way or another. So you guys seem pretty morally certain that there is no God. I mean, it seems to me, ironically, that requires a leap of faith, because how can you know that?
I wouldn't say I'm morally certain. Well, and I never claim
more like where you're coming from.
And I never claim absolute certain. You want to address this one real quick, or?
Well, I mean, I would ask how you're defining God, and that's the question I would ask.
I mean, these are good questions,
Well, the thing is that we're not the ones defining a God and claiming that it doesn't exist. We're responding to claims that a God does exist. Now, it's kind of what it sounds like. What you're saying is this argument that it takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to be a theist.
Maybe not more, but maybe just as much.
But it's not. Does it take more faith to disbelieve the claims about Bigfoot than it does to believe them?
Well, that's an interesting point. But, I mean, even with Bigfoot, okay, I don't want to compare God to Bigfoot.
Well, okay, but in general, faith is... There are a number of ways in which we go about determining what is believable or not to each of us. It's the philosophical field of epistemology. What counts as evidence? What counts as belief? Knowledge is a subset of belief that may in fact be called justified true belief. All of these things are important. But in reality, on a day-to-day basis, what we do is we analyze claims through this heuristic that we've developed. That helps us determine whether or not a claim is likely to be true. We're not making claims about absolute truth. And when I hear claims about the existence of a God, even claims that I used to believe, I now find that there's insufficient evidence to justify those claims. Doesn't mean that I believe that they're absolutely untrue. Some of them I do because they're logically inconsistent.
Are you saying that you believe there's no God, whereas Christians or other religious people believe there is a God?
Well, see, that's the thing. For me, in atheism in general, is a lack of belief in a God. If the question is, do you believe a God exists? If you say yes, you're a theist. Anything else, including I don't know, you're an atheist.
I thought if you said I don't know, that meant agnostic.
No. Agnosticism and atheism aren't mutually exclusive, because agnosticism and Gnosticism go to what you know, and theism and atheism go to what you believe. There are subsets. So you could be an agnostic atheist, somebody who doesn't claim to know whether or not there is a God but doesn't believe. Or you could be a Gnostic theist, somebody who doesn't believe that there's a God and they also claim that they know that there's no God. Under those definitions, I'm an agnostic atheist. Under a slightly different set of definitions, there's weak atheism and strong atheism. I tend to reject all these because they clutter up the issue. The simplest thing is, I don't believe that any of the claims about the existence of a God have met their burden of proof sufficient to make me believe them. I also, on a side note, and this isn't all atheists, happen to believe that there is in fact no God. And the reason for this, that actually is a position that I would have to justify. It's not faith-based because I don't believe it for no reason. I don't believe it without good reason. But I also don't believe it
to justify a negative in general rhetorical terms.
Yes, and that's the thing. I'm not claiming this to an absolute certainty because I realize that it's not true that you can't prove a negative, but this type of negative would require exhaustive knowledge. But I don't view knowledge that way. Do you believe that there are pixies, for example?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I mean, I believe it, no, but I'm not certain of it.
Do you believe that leprechauns exist?
I've seen some short Irishmen before. I don't know.
Okay.
I think I know where you're coming from.
Okay. I don't believe that leprechauns exist. And I would, under any conventional day-to-day colloquial definition, say, I know there's no such thing as leprechauns. I'm not claiming to absolutely know for certain that nowhere in the universe, at no time, did a leprechaun actually exist. I'm talking about things in practical terms, in terms that are useful. So it's fair for me, in the context that it's fair for me to say I know there's no such thing as leprechauns, I can say I know there's no such thing as a God. But that kind of knowledge isn't what most religious folks are talking about when they say they know. And because of that, I just simply say I don't happen to have a belief in a God. I don't believe that a God exists.
But see, that's why they call them believers. They're not so much trying to talk about knowledge in a
Right.
practical sense. They're talking about belief, which
Right.
is exactly the same thing.
But they can still be wrong. And the bigger thing isn't just whether or not they can prove their case or whether somebody can disprove it. Your beliefs inform your actions. I don't mind if somebody, like I said before, I have plenty of friends who have beliefs in gods, various gods and various religions. I don't have a problem with that. Well, I have some small problem because I prefer that people, be able to justify their beliefs with something more than, personal experience or, faith evidence.
But maybe that's an unrealistic expectation because
Why? Why? It applies for everything. Name one thing besides religious belief where that would be an unrealistic expectation.
Well, I mean,
Bzz.
other people don't necessarily have to feel like they want to justify their beliefs, but you do. I don't see why that's
Yes,
important.
because I care whether or not my beliefs are true. If you don't care, if you just want to believe what's comfortable and feels good, that's fine. But I happen to care about whether or not my beliefs are true. That's the difference.
But how
I'm not saying
can
you
one
specifically.
ascertain that according to what criteria?
According to the criteria that is most useful in determining fact from fantasy, evidence
Pretty
and argument.
subjective. It all sounds pretty subjective.
No, it's not. It's not simple. I mean, what do you? What's a good example from science? The orbit of Pluto, which Jeff D has used before.
That's a good example.
It takes, 200 and some odd years for Pluto to orbit, but we haven't even known about its existence for that long. So how do we know that it actually orbits? How do we know that it's ever completed a full orbit, or that it ever will? We don't know.
So you can know that,
But we have the math, and we have the science and the evidence that confirms this former planet is conforming to the laws of gravity, the laws of physics that govern the universe, that are consistently reliable. It's not like science stops working on occasion. There's a reason why there's no documentation for a miracle, because these are violations of natural laws, and they just don't happen. There are things that we may not have a good explanation for right away, but nothing has turned physics on its head.
That's all very interesting, but I don't see the direct equivalency between physics and theology.
You know why? Because one's real and one's not.
One involves what we call knowledge, and one involves what we call belief, which aren't exactly the same thing.
Okay. Do you think beliefs matter?
I would hope so.
I mean, if your beliefs inform your actions, wouldn't you want to know, to the best that you possibly could, we can't know everything, that your beliefs are true or likely true? Wouldn't you want to get rid of as many false beliefs as possible?
Not necessarily. I mean, you get to learn about things even if you don't necessarily agree with them.
I didn't say learn about them. I said believe. I can learn about all kinds of religions.
I'm not quite sure what you meant by that.
I spent a great amount of time learning about all kinds of religions. I said beliefs. Wouldn't you want to have as many true beliefs and as few false beliefs as possible?
Ideally, yeah, but how would you know? It seems like a kind of a...
That's the question.
Mission.
That's the question. How do you go about determining whether or not your beliefs are likely to be true or likely to be false?
But see, who are we to assign likelihood to beliefs? It just
Who else could? You don't think that we have any reliable method for distinguishing fact from fantasy?
Nothing that's concrete.
So why do we lock people up in insane asylums?
That's a very good question.
You don't think that there's good justification for that?
In some cases, yeah, and in other cases, no.
If somebody tells you that they were abducted by aliens,
people tell me that all the time.
You don't think there's any good way to distinguish between whether or not they're giving a real, accurate, factual story, or perhaps
I don't believe them, but I can't know for sure.
Well, I get rid of this notion of certainty. Get rid of this notion of absolute certainty. We're talking about practical knowledge. Absolute certainty is a red herring. Oh, I can't know for sure. Well, of course, you can't know anything for sure.
So how can
Does
you
that
know
mean
for
we
sure
don't?
There's no God? How can you know for sure?
No. Because I'm not claiming absolute certainty. I'm claiming within the context of reality that is useful, that is a matter of common discussion, that there is insufficient evidence to justify belief for me. and that there is no claim of this absolute certainty or knowledge. I don't claim to know that there is no God anywhere.
Okay, well that's cool because I didn't realize that. I thought that atheists were pretty hand in hand, hardline. There is no God, and we know that for sure.
I happen to believe there is no God, but I don't claim this as an absolute certainty because I think absolute certainty is useless. Now, to the degree that we can know anything, I think it is pretty close to knowledge, at least for me.
But you admit that that's kind of subjective and certainly at least arguable.
Sure. But the only thing that's going to change my mind is evidence and reasoned argument, not appeals to emotion, not eyewitness testimonial, anecdotal evidence of my grandpa had cancer and we prayed and he got better. Well, so what?
So you're claiming there's a lack of evidence and therefore there's no reason to believe it.
Yep.
Well, I got. How about this? How about I just come down there and punch your fat head in for Jesus?
That was great. I love the fact that you held on, really, for a long time. It was, as long as I don't mind. We've had other prank callers in the past, and as long as there's a good conversation that gets to good points, because honestly, having that discussion with you, it wasn't for your benefit. I don't have any illusions about whose mind I'm going to change and who I'm not going to change. I'm not going to sit around and argue with my parents, for example, because I don't think there's any likelihood that I'm going to change their mind. The reason we do the show and the reason why I'm happy to have discussions like that with people is because there may be somebody else listening who maybe one little thing I say helps them change their mind or solidify a position. Maybe something you said, apart from the face punching, may have done the same thing. If somebody listens to a discussion like that, participates, and actually thinks, if they walk away and their faith is strengthened, okay, I won't be particularly thrilled, but I'll be happy that they actually consider the argument when we're interested in a discussion. And, the fact that you're not so much, really didn't bother me that much.
He's obviously interested in listening to the show.
Yeah,